Hello, friends. Good evening, all of you. On the behalf of Sanas Foundation, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this edition of Sanas Dialogues. And today we are going to discuss a very critical issue. That's the situation in Iran, because a lot is happening in West Asia, and what's unfolding in Iran that is likely to have its geopolitical tremors across the world. And certainly, it's going to shape the future, and it will have an impact on everything, ranging from geoeconomy to geopolitics to radicalization to the global terror landscape, everything. And today, we have a brilliant expert with us, Mr. Burzin Wagmar. We have two other scholars also with us, Dr. John Nomikos from Greece and Professor Avita. Dr. John is having some issues with the connectivity, so he's joining. But in the meantime, we can start with our discussion today. So I'll briefly introduce Mr. Burzin Wagmar and then invite him for his opening remarks. Mr. Burzin Wagmar, he is with the Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS University of London. He's also a senior fellow with the Sanas Foundation, and he's a noted expert on Iran, Afghanistan, and the West Asian geopolitics and South Asian political and geopolitical issues. He's also a polyglot. He speaks Pashto. He is an expert in Farsi, so he understands those nuances in a very nuances of Iran and their complexity in a very different manner. So he has a take which is very futuristic and will help us understand what's unfolding in Iran in a very different manner. I guess it will be highly useful for all the students of international relations and policymakers. So a very warm welcome to you, Mr. Burzin Wagmar. And initially, I would like to begin with your opening remarks. So please, I request you to share your thoughts, and then we'll have many questions for you. And you have about 12 to 13 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, and good evening to one and all. And my best gratitude to the Sanas Foundation for yet another webinar on Iran, which is a timely topic. In my opening remarks, I would like to commence that it's just been announced, unconfirmed reports a few minutes ago, that 2 tankers have been seized in the Persian Gulf. So more details awaited, and that's just very skeletal, but let's see how that pans out. And also that Turkish President Erdogan is pushing for Turkey to be involved in the mediation talks between the US and Iran, which were on again, off again into the early hours this morning. They were postponed actually or deferred, and now they're back again in Muscat, and not Istanbul as it was announced at the start of the week. But coming to where I stand currently with issues. Khomeini's false equation of Iranian sovereignty tied to the Islamic Revolution of 1979 has seen him tie himself up in one too many dilemmas. Khamenei has nothing to offer except that he's maddeningly indecisive and doesn't have the gumption or the will to actually undertake any negotiation or compromise, because that would fly in the face of the very raison d'etre of the regime, which, as we speak, is celebrating its 40th anniversary between the 1st and the 10th of February, with 11th February marked every year as the victory day of the Islamic Revolution, which is when on 11th Feb 79, Khomeini triumphed, and the Shah had left a month earlier on Jan 16th, and the armed forces had decided they were going to take a back seat and become neutral, and they offered their allegiance to Khomeini in the last 3 days between 9th and 11th Feb. So 11th Feb is celebrated as that. So you can imagine the timing is extremely poignant for Khamenei and the revolution's custodians and vanguards, at least those of that generation still left, and the legatees of it left in the Revolutionary Guards known as the Pasdarane Enqilab, and the Basij Shia militia, who are the backup forces, both of whom are doctrinally driven to preserve the purity of the revolution, as so is Khamenei a hardliner going back to Khomeini's days and the earlier generation, one of the few remaining sorts who does remember that period. And for him to understand him as the supreme leader, as the Rahbar, as it's known in Persian, or the Wali-e-Faqih, the jurisconsult, the Shia vice-regent of the jurisconsult position that Khomeini instituted after the Islamic referendum of March 1979, creating an Islamic Republic on 1st April 79. It's to understand this that for him, that is Khamenei, they are dissimilar, and his ideological rigidity has brought the republic to this impasse today. Apart from the indecisiveness that I've mentioned, it must be pointed out that if it really comes to a showdown, he would choose moralism over reality or even surviving. That is to say, existential expediency to preserve the revolution and the regime. Because why is the dilemma there? Because it feeds into his sheer psychosis of martyrdom. You have to understand Iran in that context, which is distinct from mostly other predominantly Sunni Muslim states of the Islamic Ummah, ecumen. And it is this sense of martyrdom which has gone into leading to defiance, Iranian strategic autonomy and flexing, and this natural right, going back to the Shah's Pahlavi Iran days of looking upon itself as the regional hegemon and heavyweight in West Asia and the Western Indian Ocean, and that it is only natural that others in the region monitor or tailor their policies to suit Iran's requirements. That also leads us to point out the question of the proxies that we've seen who have created havoc. And I don't just mean the recent proxies going back to the last 10 to 15 years with the Houthis and Hamas and Hezbollah, going back to 1983 in Lebanon when they first began their trail of terror, but also based on Khomeini's ideas of exporting the Islamic Revolution and this radical worldview of Islam, of the dispossessed against decadent Muslim corrupt potentates and rulers, which of course finds immediate resonance among marginalized Muslims globally. So Iran fancies itself not just as the global custodian of Shia rights and sentiments and preserving Shia Muslims in what is an ocean of Sunni Islam, but also the marginalized, which explains why it is so passionately committed to Hamas and Hezbollah as proxies, which are headaches also for other Arab regimes in the region, not just Israel. And Israel might be a point here to bring in this aspect and expose a fallacy that we see doing the rounds in current discourse, particularly among leftists and among the anti-imperialist Western brigade of sorts of protagonists, propagandists, journalists and the like, that this really is all about Israel when all is said and done, and the Zionist lobby which is looking to unravel Iran and topple the regime and so on and so forth. You can say Israel has apprehensions of Iran. Well, but for that to be justified, and indeed it is, you must also mention that Iran is the only country in the world that has repeatedly talked about annihilating another country. There is enmity across the world. One sees it traditionally among rivals such as Sino-Japanese rivalry, Indo-Pakistan rivalry. And to take the Indo-Pakistan context, India never talks about removing Pakistan from the face of the earth. And nor does Pakistan talk like that about India. But Iran does say that about Israel, and it feeds into Israel's neurosis and justified anxieties of a state that was created in the wake of the Holocaust, and for global Jewry's second chance to come together and survive and flourish. Iran has never backed off from that. And you must remember that the Arab-Israeli issue is a political issue which primarily involves the Arab neighbors of Israel, none of whom have actually called for dismantling Israel from the face of the earth. But Iran does that, and it has in Persian, as it says, as Sahane Ruzgar Maf Shavad, that is vanishing from the arena of time, the Zionist regime, to echo Khomeini, which Ahmadinejad picked up and set into effect from 2006 onwards, which is in tandem with the nuclear program discoveries and the first slew of sanctions that were put on Iran from December 2006, and so on and so forth, which is familiar territory. I don't want to rehearse that. I've done that in the past already. Then there's the question of the Europeans, never mind the Americans, and the so-called critical dialogue with the European Union, which started in 1992, thinking that somehow Iran could be brought in from the cold and to modify or temper its discourse and actions. Everything has fallen on deaf ears, because what has happened is that it has garnered to the fullest contracts from the French, Germans, and the British. It has sought to build on economic relationships with these Western European capitals. It has done nothing to modify its behavior in the process in return. For example, bombing and killing Jewish old age pensioners in Buenos Aires, Argentina, 1994, killing Iranian dissidents in Berlin cafes in downtown Berlin, 1997, and the Germans did nothing about it. In England, we have problems with Iranian secret agents and MI5, the security service, talking about Iran targeting Iranian broadcasters and journalists whose lives are in danger as we speak, and nothing has yet been done by the government. It is only the last week that we see the Revolutionary Guards who've been proscribed as a terror outfit, which of course the US had done earlier. And Britain is still mulling or just about to do the same. So the question of the Europeans modifying their behavior and coming halfway to the bridge to help Iran come out of the cold and somehow dispel Iran's insecurities and anxieties as a revolutionary radical regime is complete nonsense. They've gone more out of their way to bring in Tehran, and nothing has come out of it. Likewise, the GCC partners who have suffered, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, with coups that were organized by Iran back in 1981, who have all suffered from the Iranian impress in the region. So it's not an Israeli thing, and that needs to be repeatedly pointed out, that the current discourse which is skewered online in social media and even print media and elsewhere, that this is really Israel which is driving and beating the drums of war, and the Zionist lobby which is out to dismantle Iran, is not true. It is only true insofar as you can say that it is concerns with Israel's immediate security, because Iran is committed to the acts that it plays out of killing Jews wherever it can, as such. And please don't forget the attack on Israeli diplomats in 2012 in New Delhi too, which Iran conducted on Indian soil. Again, nothing came out of that too, you must note. So Iran has gotten away with a lot, and everyone has given them more than a fair benefit of the doubt to do so, and its behavior has not been modified but emboldened over and over again. Then we come to what happened in the last 48 hours with the Shahid 129 drones allegedly being fired towards the USS Abraham Lincoln in the North Arabian Sea. That again is a time-tested practice with the Revolutionary Guards Navy, which wants to test American resolve and to check on what, to see US naval reactions of what would happen with this armada that President Trump has said that is being built up in the North Arabian Sea. Iran claims jurisdiction over the Gulf of Oman per the 1993 law of the maritime boundaries, but that flies in the face of the United Nations law of the sea, and the US doesn't recognize it. So the USS Abraham Lincoln is perfectly at liberty to be in international waters in the North Arabian Sea. It is not part of the Iranian purview. That needs to be pointed out too, or Iranian maritime jurisdiction. And then what has happened since December 20th, 2025 with this latest spate of killings? Anything from 30 to 46,000 Iranians have been killed in cold blood. And relatives are only able to claim their bodies for final rites and burial after paying the government a hefty sum. Because the government claims that bullets cost the national exchequer and you have to pay up if you want to claim the body. So you can imagine with that sentiment, Khamenei has completely lost any and every social legitimacy, and the social contract between the regime and the people is completely broken. What would happen is that if Trump undertakes kinetic action, and it is a historic moment for him to do so, it must be done in such a way that you wed your intentions with your objectives. Because Khamenei has been given to believe that if strikes take place on Iran in the immediate future, there is every likelihood of Iranian population again undertaking a civil disobedience campaign of strikes and protests out in the street, and that they would be emboldened by Trump's efforts to do so. But what must be realized that Iran is not Venezuela, and that if Washington has thought it would somehow undertake tinkering with the regime at the very top and leave the security, intelligence, repressive apparatus largely in unchecked, with the levers of power and oppression intact, that is not what the Iranian population, whether in Iran or the diaspora, is seeking. That is not what they want from President Trump or the West, because what they seek is a dismantling of the regime. And that is a patent fact. It is not a neocon overture. It is not being driven by right-wing radicals globally, or again by the so-called Jewish lobby. This is what Iranians themselves are saying, that we cannot have a Venezuelan cosmetic changeover only to have old wine in new bottle with the same repressive tactics and the same custodians of the state in power, namely the Revolutionary Guards, who don't think twice about shooting its own population in cold blood. That needs to be pointed out too. Also needs to be finally stated is that the current modus vivendi reached between the GCC and Iran is based on the fact that since the 12-day war, Foreign Minister Arakchi has made some overtures to Cairo and Riyadh, and for some reason, well, tactical reasons, Cairo, Riyadh, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, for now have been asking Washington to stay its hand, because it seems that they can manage to live with a beleaguered, battered, shaken up, partly destroyed Iran in its neighborhood. Something of a wounded crocodile is acceptable to them at this stage, and that somehow it's okay. But then the question is, how long until Iran bounces back and yet again starts on its spate of activities like assassination plots against the Saudi ambassador in Washington 2011, or the Al-Khobar bombing in Saudi Arabia again in 1996, attacking Riyadh International Airport drone strikes of 2020. And then, of course, these very same Arabs will run to Washington, do something and save us. So for now, to say that there is a modus vivendi, it is only temporal and transient between the protagonists in the region, particularly MBS and others. But these very same individuals, typically, given how Middle Eastern politics is, will be next go again to crying to Washington to come and save their skin when Iran is not on the back burner and back. And speaking of bouncing back, please remember that Tehran over the last decade has not only honed its skills in reverse engineering of missiles, but also in missile stretching its airframes, building lighter combustible material for mounting payloads on missiles, and also increasing their missile range. And the missile production remains unchecked, and that, of course, Tehran doesn't want to talk about tomorrow in the talks. And of course, we should ask Pakistan about how it felt to be at the receiving end of Iran's drones in Balochistan, which happened in January 2024. The Pakistanis could tell us a thing or two about that, which should not be forgotten. And please do not labor under the illusion that these extended payload Shahid and other missiles, the Khyber Shekan and others, cannot reach, because they can reach all the way up to Bangalore in southern India, including Bombay and India's western regions and northern regions as such. I'll stop here and let in other speakers to come in, and then we can take up the discussion subsequently. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Burzin, for your insightful remarks. We have many questions for you. We'll get back to you. But before we ask you questions, I would like to invite you, today's second speaker, Dr. John Nomikos, for his opening remarks here. Let me introduce Dr. John Nomikos. Dr. John M. Nomikos is director at the Research Institute for European and American Studies. He is the chairman of European Intelligence Academy and founding editor of the Journal of European and American Intelligence Studies. And Dr. John is a renowned speaker, expert on geopolitical affairs, particularly in the Mediterranean region and also on West Asia. So we are really honored to have him with us here today. Dr. John, I'll request you to deliver your opening remarks, and maybe you can focus more on the larger geopolitical ramifications in the region of what's happening in Iran. You have about 10 minutes.
I'm in school now, and I have a lot of students around me, so I have to talk to you. And first of all, thank you very much for your invitation to be on this online workshop. Well, regarding Iran, from Mediterranean, it's quite important, to realize that could explode a lot of consequences, economic consequences, in Europe, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean, because we do realize that Iran is not Iraq, is not Syria, is not Libya, and of course, as you realize, the geostrategic, possession of Iran in the Gulf region might create a lot of problem in the Gulf region, and the price also of the oil, which is going to be like a global economic crisis. Now, I think, this is my personal opinion, I think that the United States would not attack Iran, even though they put a lot of social media streaming pressure on them, because they do realize that by doing that is going to create a lot of problem also in the stability of the region. There are American bases there. Also, the global economic that they have between Gulf region and the EU. And what happened last week between the European Union, India, free trade agreement. This is one of the best things that we can see. But Iran right now is a big premier to export its oil, not only to India, but also, to China. So you realize that the Chinese would have a big problem in the Southeast Asia if Iran is attacked, because Russia and China would possibly support, economically and any kind of other, security. So if we see realistically speaking, Iran is not an easy target, even though Donald Trump wanted to say a lot about that, and I do believe it that the best way, the best way is to negotiate tomorrow on Oman. All right, so the Iranians, the Americans should stay down on the table and see how they can solve the problem peacefully. Because if they do that by military action, is going to blow up the whole area. The Saudis are not going to be out of them. Bahrain, which is the 7th Fleet, is there. Qatar, they have an American base, is there. So I think they need to find a way to persuade, to convince Iran to stop, the nuclear, program. And what I heard today is that the Russians are going to withdraw some of the uranium, from Iran to them. So to have a regime change, well, this is not quite easy. The point is that Iran society needs a reform. Iran is an old civilization. It's one of the, like India, like China, like Greece, like Egypt. Iran, should adjust to the new technology, to the new geopolitical change. They need to open the society because they have a lot to offer, and not just to be, like a country that supports, proxy terrorist network. Now, the United States has said that, the Revolutionary Guard in Iran is a terrorist organization by the EU. They said that, so it's about time the Iranian government to open up, to reform, to explode economic opportunity, to come close to other countries in the Eastern Mediterranean, to come close to India, all right, to collaborate with as many countries they can, and to show that they are more than a state that support, a proxy terrorist or jihadi network. From what we see here, Iran is a big exporter also to Europe, all right? So the point is that we should, come down and try to realize in the Southeast Asia, Iran is a big civilizational country. The same with Israel. They need to sit down to find a way to collaborate because, the conflict between Israel and Iran is a big one. It could not be, for decades ahead, but they need to find a way to slow down because the whole area right now needs, harmony, needs peaceful and economic growth. So I hope Iran understands what I said because it's better for everyone to realize that we need, to work with each other and jointly to solve the problem. The Iranian, the Israeli, the European Union, and of course India is one of the most important countries in the region, and India could provide all the energetic parameters and diplomatic goals to have Iran, as peaceful as they can. Thank you very much, Mr. Africa, for allowing me to talk about in this wonderful workshop. And it's really a matter for me to talk to India And I wish you the best to the continuous success. Thank you very much, sir, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Nomikos. Thank you for your insightful remarks. You brought out many diverse aspects of the crisis that we are facing, that if Iran is attacked, definitely it's going to lead to the oil crisis. Iranian society needs to reform. It's a civilization. But then there are many burning questions which continue to prevail. Definitely, Iran is certainly a great civilization, but many analysts, many Iranians say that this is Islamist regime has basically destroyed the rich legacy of Iranian civilization, which it had before that. Okay, perhaps, or in the pre-Islamic Iran. Besides that, let's say, for example, I mean, a hypothetical situation, if Iran comes to terms through some negotiation with the US government and with the Israelis, are they going to abandon these proxies forever, Hezbollah and Hamas? And when I mention this, we should also be mindful of the fact that Hezbollah and Hamas have not yet abandoned their arms, and they are least likely to do that. Perhaps if Iran is given this regime in Iran is given another chance to breathe, they may use this time to recuperate and once again start supporting their proxies. And if that happens, what is the future of Israel in that region? And secondly, this regime has very strong religious extremist ideas. Are they even capable or even receptive to the ideas of reforms? So many questions prevail, but definitely will answer our expert speakers these questions after we invite our last speaker for today's session for her opening remarks. So we have an amazing expert from Israel, Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovic. I'll just briefly introduce her and then I'll invite her to give her opening remarks. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Avital.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovic is the director of IRGC, Jerusalem. She is an expert in Middle East and Balkan diplomacy and in geopolitical strategy. Dr. Avital, so you are from the region. You have seen how it functions in the Israeli military or in the West Asian, say, conflict theaters. And definitely, I mean, Israel is in the line of the fire facing the heat. So I have some very, I would say, straight questions for you. What are the options that Israel has, even for that matter with the Americans? I mean, are you going to come to a modus vivendi with Iranians, or is it even going to survive? Or do you think that a violent regime change, not just a superficial, I would say, formal, some kind of a rupture at the top, but I would say a complete overhauling of the regime is the necessity? And if it's a necessity, can it even happen? Like, what would it entail? Is it a realistic goal or not? You have about 10 minutes for your opening remarks, then we'll come back with questions.
Thank you so much for being with you today. I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, a beautiful sunny day outside in our Israeli winter. We are right now, I would say, in...
Hello.
We are right now in a pivotal point of time, I would say, with Iran. So let me describe what I mean, and I want to by also quoting from the interview in which the foreign minister of Iran, IRGC, gave to CNN, and he said the following: Iran and the US are at fateful point in time. We can achieve a fair and equitable deal to ensure no nuclear weapons. This mutually beneficial outcome is possible even in a short period of time. On the other hand, he said in the interview, there may be miscalculation and even aggression. So here is where we are. Here there's a high alert in all over the Israeli military bases in the country, preparing for any possible surprise from Iran. Obviously, the understanding is that the US sent here and in the region, in the neighboring countries, different kinds of military assets. By the way, there are still some of the assets which are still on their way here. Not everything has arrived, including, by the way, air defense batteries of different kinds. And again, not only to Israel, but also to the region. So the US is nearly ready for any kind, I would say, of a military interaction. However, that military interaction may or may not involve Israeli military interaction. In other words, Israel, the government here says, well, this is an American-Iranian confrontation, not including Israel. But if Israel will be attacked, surely Israel will retaliate. By the way, Israel can be attacked not only by Iran directly, by also the Houthis, for example, which I'm sure you've heard the latest declarations by different Houthi officials saying that they are partnering with Iran, they're backing Iran, and they're planning to attack Israel, as they did many times before. By the way, let me tell you that Israel has attacked the Houthis in Yemen in the past 2 years 17 times, 17 times. Of course, military assets and some economic assets as well. So should there be a collapse of the talks, which I think will happen, and by the way, nobody talks about the choice of Oman, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but I will happily share that Iran and Oman share vast economic relations. The trade last year between Iran and Oman increased in 24% than in the year 2024. So obviously there's candid will to increase the relations between the two countries. Now let's say these talks, which are scheduled on Friday in Oman, 8 a.m. in the morning Israel time, will collapse. By the way, they can collapse after 1 hour. There are three things which remain a main gap between the sides. And of course, when I say sides, I mean Israel and the US together and Iran. The first one, the enrichment of that's 400 and 450 kilograms of uranium. And the location of that, where will that be removed or destroyed? That's number one. The second issue has to do with the proxies in the region. As you know, Israel made sure to weaken Hezbollah significantly, but there are other proxies as well. And as long as Iran is trying, and it is trying, to smuggle over and over again arms to Hezbollah in Lebanon and fund them with money, they will be back on their feet. So that's the other issue, the proxies. And then we have the third issue, and that is the ballistic missiles. The ballistic missiles are produced in Iran. They have the estimation in Israel that they have today like 2,000 ballistic missiles. Of course, a lot of the launchers, a big percentage of their launchers has been destroyed by Israel in June, but they are producing these missiles. These are missiles, by the way, who reach not only Israel, but also Europe. These missiles in June killed 30 Israeli people and destroyed 20,000 apartments when only 36 missiles landed in Israel out of 550 that have been launched. So approximately 90% success rate in interception. So from our perspective and the American perspective, in my understanding, these 3 points are critical for the dialogue. Obviously, Iran is saying under every tree that they're only willing to discuss the nuclear issue, and this is far from sufficient. By the way, if you look back 11 years ago at the JCPOA, not the ballistic missiles and not the proxies were mentioned. What was mentioned, and it is a challenge, was removing the sanctions. Removing the sanctions gave Iran the ability to get more international money, and that money eventually went back to the proxies. So this is like a vicious cycle which needs to be broken. So should the talks collapse, and let's imagine that the US will strike Iran, I don't envision that it will be a short strike, namely, I don't know, 20, 30, 100 targets in 2 hours, and that will be the end. I don't think that will be the case. But I do think that it will trigger the protest again. This is the main goal, to trigger the protests. I don't see a situation where the regime collapses tomorrow morning following an attack. That will not happen. The regime is weak, yes, but it's not the kind of situation that will disperse it all together. It will give the people motivation to go out, because at the end of the day, with an attack and without an attack, what motivated the people in the streets was the lack of water, the lack of food, the lack of funding. And this will not change after the attack like before the attack. And they still have the reasons to go outside. So we are here in a very tense period of time, waiting to see and monitor the next steps. We're in high alert here, although the country is functioning as normal. There are no specific or special regulations for the population here. And let me stop here.
Thank you very much, Colonel Amita. So now we have the next Q&A round. Mr. Burzin, yes. So Burzin, I have two very interesting questions for you. So first, can you tell us briefly about the internal situation in Iran? Like, how strong is IRGC? How strong is the regime? And also, in terms of the population composition, we are told that the people in the villages, the peasantry, basically subscribe to the regime's Islamist ideology, and this revolution, the protests are merely confined to some urban middle class people. So I want to know what are the internal dynamics. And secondly, my question pertains to India. So we see that when minorities are slaughtered in Bangladesh, India makes a lot of hue and cry. When it happens in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, or when the Hindu minorities are killed in Pakistan, we also raise huge protests. But here in case of Iran, a lot of innocent protesters are being killed and they are being brutally repressed. But we don't see any statement from any I was active stance from the Indian government. Secondly, if we, let's say, if for very purely tactical geopolitical reasons, we discount that Indian government may have its own compulsions and it's not in the position to take any stance. The Indian right wingers, which are so powerful today in the domestic political and social setup, and they exercise an overwhelming influence on the government, are also very quiet. And this government particularly, and also the Indian right wing, which is known for its tough stance against terrorism and Islamist radicalization, is keeping, I would say, a very disturbing silence over this. And interestingly, the Islamist regime in Iran has also been contributing to the Shia radicalization in Jammu and Kashmir and in other parts of India also. They have equated the Kashmir conflict with what's happening in Gaza, drawing false parallels. So, this is something which is a bit disturbing, even on the issues of like that Citizenship Amendment Act and all. The Iranian government's stance was very anti-India. So, would you throw some light on these two questions?
They're large questions. I'll start with the second one first because I can rapidly work through it. The world's largest democracy needs to be a bit more voluble in taking a stance, especially if it likes to think of itself as a moral force, evoking Gandhiism, satyagraha, civil disobedience, non-violence, and the like. But you don't see that coming from New Delhi, whether on the Ukrainian question, due to its compulsions and historic ties with the former Soviet Union, now Russian Federation, but also then in the Iranian context, which you've asked me to comment on, because with the Hindu right, for some welter of historic reasons, the Shia do not excise them as much as Sunni Muslims do. And they think that Shia Muslims are manageable and that the relationship with the Hindus or the Hindu right wing is cordial and correct. So they feel no need to ruffle Iran's feathers. Iran in the past also has not been that voluble when it came to the Babri issue in 1992. It has been under Khamenei in recent times with the Citizenship Act 2019 August, and occasional remarks on Kashmir ever so now and often, including as late as September 2024, for instance, I believe, when Khamenei said about the plight of Kashmiris is akin to that of Gaza. That has happened in recent times, but in the past, both have been correct enough not to interfere in their affairs. But the historic reason for this is, and you must ask why the Hindu right somehow gives a free pass to this Islamic Republic, but is voluble when it comes to atrocities visited upon Hindu and other minorities in Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Afghanistan. It's because it's a question of expediency, because it suits them to do that. And also because Iran, for its part, also doesn't want to push India when it realizes that India is home to the largest 12er Shia Ithna Ashari community in the world. 15% of Islam globally is a Shia. And out of that, the 12er Shias, there are other Shias too, the 7er Ismaili Shias, the 5er Zaidi or the Houthi Shias, so on and so forth. But the predominant rump of what constitutes the Shia population are the 12er Shias, the Imami Jafri sect. And in demographic terms, the largest agglomeration is in the Indian Republic. So Iran is obviously keen not to dial that too far in incurring India's wrath. And so India pays the compliment by not also interfering in Iranian affairs, including shooting its own population in cold blood. Then there is also the question of economic ties, that Iran for the longest time was one of India's key oil suppliers. Not so much now, because Iraq also has been a long-term supplier. But with the sanctions that whittled down, and then you had this barter rupee real trade, which took off from the around 2012 onwards, and which Indians don't seem to talk about, Dr. Pandya. But I would like to mention that in Indian history since independence, if the Telgi Papers scandal is right at the top with some 27 or 28,000 crores, which tops all the mother of scams, how many Indians know this rupee real trade scam to the tune of some 19 to 20,000 crore rupees that has been going on? And with UCO Bank Calcutta, which was the front bank for the government of India for these barter transactions, and that also that it finally involved the Enforcement Directorate in New Delhi to step in, and measures had to be taken to allay that situation. So it's a racket. And that was necessitated because of this. They couldn't do business with straightforward purchases of oil. But you may want to look up that later, because nobody in India seems to talk about the rupee real trade scam, which was finally came to light around 2017 or 2018 to the tune of 20,000 crores, as I pointed out. So there are these factors which lead India to not necessarily antagonize Iran. And also for the Indians, you must realize, whether Hindu right or not, any Muslim voice which is neutral or muted is considered a feather in India's cap, or another quiver in its another arrow in its quiver against Pakistan. So policies towards Iran, but also across the GCC, are done by New Delhi with Pakistan in mind. India can say it's conducting a bilateral policy with these states, but of course the Pakistan element is the elephant in the room which cannot be denied. New Delhi always factors that in, whether it's a Hindu right-wing or a left-wing or wing government. That is a patent fact for the last 70 plus years. Now coming to which is my traditional patch, Iranian studies. As Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich pointed out, the regime is not going to collapse tomorrow. It is a strong state. It is a hollowed out state, but it's still a strong state with all the levers of power repression intact, which have been honed successfully in murdering and suppressing its own population with every bout of social protest and violence going back to 1992, when these riots at endemic intervals started, including the Green Movement of 2009 with the stolen vote after the fraudulent election of Ahmadinejad, which is when Iranians came out in their millions. In this latest spate of violence, which occurred from late December till now, Iranians came out in their hundreds of thousands. They did not come out in their millions. Point number one. Point number two, what happened this time was that every part of Iran was racked by violence. So it wasn't a Gen Z urban phenomenon of the latte-sipping youngsters in North Tehran's posh cafes, which one would like to think of as in previous times. It involved all 31 provinces rocked by instability, because even working class Shia pious traditional Iranians who don't sip lattes or cappuccinos saw their savings evaporate overnight. And now with the rial to a dollar at about, say, 1.65 million, and savings overnight, vanished. Plus the collapse of IMD Bank in September, which was the first snowball effect that set all this into motion from December onwards. And it's just that working and middle class Iranians, not necessarily those who talk about hijab unveiling rights, or for the rights of women to drive motorbikes, or to walk your pets, which incidentally is forbidden in Iran, or to play chess, or to read what you want to. Things which normally chafe a younger, restive generation, a 21st century wired, internet, socially mobile population like any other youth across the world. Those are youth issues which you find in Venezuela or Nepal or Bangladesh or elsewhere. Fine. But in Iran, it's not just that which occurred in this latest wave of violence, because everyone was on board across all 31 provinces, I reiterate, plus the poorest sections and some of the poorest provinces in Western Iran too, where there were massive outpourings of outrage against the regime because of living conditions. That overnight things just went spiraled from bad to worse. And then there's the question also of what's to be done next. Are you going to tinker the regime and bring in economic reforms? Because that is not going to help. And again, what you see in the Western press among centrists and particularly leftists and anti-imperialists, that Iran would not have been brought to its knees but for these sanctions, that is nonsense again. It is another fallacy, just like the Jewish lobby fallacy. Why? How do I explain this to you, Dr. Pandya, and your viewers? Sanctions, I repeat, sanctions, ladies and gentlemen, are a sonography. It's not an X-ray, but it's a detailed report, because a sonography is a more detailed report of what is rotten and ailing within the body politic. If you place sanctions on the Iranian economy, that is a sonography which lights up parts of the body and shows how rotten the system is from within. Remove the sanctions, it will not allay the economic situation. The problems, endemic problems that go back to the 1980s and 1990s still remain, with structural sclerotic inequalities, skewed budgetary outlays, mismanagement, corruption, and the like. Removing sanctions, I repeat, has nothing to do with bringing Iran back to a semblance of normalcy, or reducing the inflation, or checking its balance of payments, so on and so forth. Sanctions can aggravate the situation, I grant you that. But it's like an antigen if you give to the body in order to heal it. But like I said, the sanctions are a sonography. It shafts a very harsh spotlight on what is wrong in the first place with the economy, even if sanctions were not placed. So please don't buy into the nonsense that is put out by so many that tell you that this is pretty much anti-Western tirades, that it's only the West and Israel which is out to debilitate Iran's economy. Nothing could be further from the truth. And coming back to the aspects of the regime, why is it a strong state and it won't collapse? Because we haven't seen any fissures or cracks yet, even at the junior or middle tier levels. When protests started against the Shah in his last year of reign from 1978 January onwards, it picked momentum, and mind you, that revolution would not have succeeded, but it was all that really took place between September 78 and his departure in January 79. And the oil workers went on strike. Not to mention there were nationwide wildcat strikes across other sectors of the economy too. There have been strikes in Iran for the last 1.5 to 2 years. The tram and bus union of Tehran is a very powerful union lobby, for instance, and they have gone on strikes. The railway sectors and textile workers have also gone on strike. But it needs to coalesce into a critical national mass for something to shake up the government. That has not quite happened yet. And also, we haven't seen fissures or rebellions or mutinies, as I mentioned, of those abandoning what may be a sinking ship. The regime is still intact, and so are its stalwarts, because they have much to lose if things go astray. Yes, 2 Iranian diplomats have sought asylum in Europe from Austria. That has been announced. But one needs to see much more than that to fructify and come to pass. As I mentioned, for a critical mass to build up. We need strikes in the oil sector particularly, which I have not seen yet. We also need to see some peeling away of the Revolutionary Guards at the junior level, who may not all be doctrinally Shia fanatics and driven by ideology, but by money and corruption, which many of them are. They are not that first generation which witnessed sacred defense martyrdom with the Iran-Iraq war. Much water has flowed under the bridge over the last 40 years. You can peel away these sections or some of them through inducements. It can be done if those in the West want to undertake a concerted program to do so. You can also target, if Trump decides to do so, not just the primary level of the Revolutionary Guards, the Basij, the state prosecutor's office, the intelligence apparatus, that is the Ministry of Islamic Security. You must also target the communications, defense, and the second tier level and degrade their capabilities for something to be impactful to unravel the regime. That has not happened, obviously not yet with Trump. And we don't see that happening because the regime still has its fingers on the levers of power intact. And in that, it has been assisted by Russian and Chinese intelligence over the years. Deep packet information technology, software surveillance that has been passed on to their Iranian counterparts, but also the SVR, that is the Russian Foreign Intelligence Agency, the successor to the KGB of the communist era. They too have had profound dealings with Iranian intelligence in the last few years or decade, and they have shared these repressive tactics, which have only fine-tuned the Iranian deep state into how to tackle and gun down its own population and target them. Yeah.
Dr. Panda, you are on mute.
Dr. Nomikos, can you hear me? Hello. Dr. Nomikos? Dr. Nomikos, are you there?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Yes. So you mentioned about, first of all, that Iranian regime needs to reform and open up its very regimented and very, I would say, religiously driven lifestyle for the people. First, my question is that, I mean, are they even willing to do that? And secondly, you mentioned that both the parties, that is the Israel and the US and the Iran on the other side, they need to come and through negotiations come to a modus vivendi. How realistic is that? Thirdly, how this whole thing is going to impact the regional realignment of powers? I mean, how Turkey, Qatar, Saudis are going to look at the situation unfolding in Iran, and because that also has an impact on Greece, because Turkey-Greek relations, Greece relations are known to everyone, and so that this conflict will have a tremendous regional impact also, and beyond the region also. So, what's your take on this?
Yes, sure. Let me clarify a little bit more, because now I had, the previous speaker. Number one, nobody wants, even the United States and Europe, don't want to see another Syria or Libya civil war in Iran. Now, the point is, okay, we realize that Iran is a very tough player, for the stability of the region. But when I say we need to find a way to reform Iran, then you have to take into consideration that countries like Russia, China, and the Gulf states like, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates should find the solution, or should promote some kind of, policy to Iran that as long as you stay as you are right now and you support a lot of proxies, other groups like Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, all this kind, you're not going anywhere. The point is the situation right now, the technology is going on, and don't forget that India, like I said, is a great country, and we are going to have, except the EU freight agreement, we are going to have IMEC, the the Middle East Economic Corridor. How this is going to come from New Delhi all the way to Europe, through United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, if a war goes on in Iran? How these are going to, have a great consequences on the stability in the region? Everybody said, and the colonel said that there's a lot of domestic problem, lack of water, lack of food inside, Iran, and this creates a lot of social turmoil. Yes, I understand that. This is true, but they need to find a way, even the United States, Donald Trump, who is a great leader, also, the European Union, to find a way to calm down Iran. They need to find a way to tell them to the theocratic regime that you need to reform, you need to go on, you need to proceed with all the kind of adjustment to the new technology. I mean, Iran right now, it cannot be backward. They need to talk about you see, artificial technology. You see, so many things are going on in the 10-15 years. This civilization in Iran needs to just adjust to the new changes. The way that they act now, they keep the country. They keep the country stuck. So sooner or later, everyone, and I think Donald Trump is a very reasonable person, a reasonable president, that he will try to pressurize as much as they can, but I don't think so they will make, the Iranian state just like Syria today or Libya. It doesn't help anywhere. And the Europeans right now are looking very carefully, what's going on there, and Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, all the countries, they need stability. On the other side, you have Qatar, all right, you have Qatar, and also, you have the Houthis. Yes, they need to find a way to stop. I mean, Qatar is a very good, is a very rich country, but they support, also, the Islamic Brotherhood. They support so many terrorist networks. They have intelligence with so many countries, and Houthi is supported by Iran. But this is how long is going to be there? I mean, are we going to discuss about more problem and more increase of terrorism and more domestic problem, in Europe too? So what I see right now, realistically speaking, it's possible to have a regime, to have a reform in Iran, as long as Russia and China find a way to convince Iran to sit on the table tomorrow with the United States and to find a way, to reduce the nuclear weapon, or like I said, Russia should take the uranium back in Russia, but definitely this proxy state supported by Qatar and Iran must be stopped. And of course, Israel is a stable country, in the Middle East, and I realize what's happened in the 12 days war, but and right now, so much, instability, so much anxiety, so much stress, so much chaos. We need at least this volatile region in the Gulf region, in the Middle East, in the North Africa, to be stable as much as we can. Stability prevails in many places in the world. So I hope tomorrow, I wanted to be optimistic that something will come between Donald Trump and the Iranian, government to slow down and not to go again to another, unorthodox, civil war like Syria, Libya, Iraq, and all this kind of stuff, that we face. This, nowadays we need more stability. We cannot really go from one war to another and see human casualties from one country to another. You see what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, says, February 2022. So the best for the economic, the best for the security and the peace in the region, we need to pray tomorrow that the United States will find a way with the Iranian government to slow down, to calm down, and to have at least stability in the most interesting region in the Gulf crisis, in the Gulf region. That is very, very important for everyone to be stable and to find a way. I'm a little bit optimist, but I always believe, that we need a vision. Sometimes, Israel and Iran to find a way to collaborate and to have a good open, Abraham Accord or Kiros, accord with each other. Let's hope for the best. And thank you very much one more time for you, sir, in Usana's Foundation, that they give me, the opportunity to talk to you from Greece, and which is, a country that supports all the kind of a peaceful, recommendation to, in the Middle East, in the North Africa, in Gulf region, and I hope India is a big country, a very one of the most democratic countries that play a very energetic role in the region of Southeast Asia to persuade anyone to prefer peace than aggression, military aggression. Thank you very much, sir, and you have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you. Colonel Avital, so the last few questions for you. Can you hear me? Yes, yeah. Let's say a situation in which these talks fail and the confrontation starts between the two parties and it escalates. What are the likely possibilities? Do you see a situation akin to the US entanglement in Iraq? Because the regime has a lot of loyalist and trained fighters from Basij, IRGC, and they're going to give a strong resistance on the ground. So if the Americans move their troops in the Iranian territory, will it be a long drawn, complicated struggle, a war of attrition in which Americans will have to face huge challenges? Adding another complexity to this situation, that is the likely possibility of the Islamic NATO. We are told that because of the recent Israeli retaliation against the Hamas and strikes on Qatar, the Arab nations are getting uncomfortable, and the idea of Islamic NATO is becoming more and more stronger. We've already seen Pakistan patching up with the Saudis, and Turkey likely to join that alliance. Turkey seems to be a bit more, much more stronger after the Americans have left Kurds to their own fate, and after bringing, I would say, a jihadi in a suit, Mr. Bashar al-Assad, as the Prime President of Syria. So Turkey seems to be much more powerful. So if this sort of, I would say, Islamic NATO takes place, and this is if acts against the interest of Israel and the US, and then we have the other big players like China and Russia. And if the war prolongs for more than 2-3 years, and if the US is overstretched, let's say in Europe, or maybe because of Chinese actions in the Taiwan Strait, all these combinations are going to impact the situation in West Asia. And I would say the most critical impact will be on Israel, because Israel is in that region. So how do you look at this? I mean, what do you see happening in the future?
Yeah, you're asking me a very easy question to predict the future in the Middle East.
You are a security analyst, so
yeah.
Definitely. I mean, we ask these questions to astrologers in India, but definitely, since you are an analyst based in that region, so I guess you are the perfect person to answer this question for this discussion.
Thank you. I will try to analyze maybe the behavior in each of the actors. First of all, I don't believe that we will see any kind of lengthy war or a war of attrition. Obviously, there are thousands of targets in Iran. If you look at the Basij, it's 500,000 people. You look at the Revolutionary Guards, 150,000 more people. All of these people have dozens and dozens of bases. Of course, there are the factories of ballistic missiles, the nuclear weapon factories, and these are factories which all have many factories with little components in each. So there are numerous targets in Iran, but from here to a very long 2 years, 3 years of a war, I don't see that happening. By the way, this is not the American interest at all. Having said that, it's enough that it will be even 3 days that the other actors in the region can react. And let's look at the other actors. Hezbollah has sat quietly for the last war in June and did not act, did not fire. Although Naim Qassem gave speeches and said, we are standing by our brothers, our sisters in Iran, whatever, they still didn't do anything. Here, we're hearing different music today. And this is quite a change. And the question is, will they act or not? Because if Hezbollah will act, then obviously Lebanon, which is on the verge of being a failed state, there is no other way of describing it due to its very dire economic situation, then obviously Lebanon will be targeted by Israel, because Israel will not just sit idly by, allow thousands of rockets to fly across its border from Lebanon, and Hezbollah is still very much there, although we have a ceasefire agreement from November 24, unfortunately, we have killed something like 400 Hezbollah terrorists, which are still walking in the area where they're not supposed to be, south of the Litani River. So ammunition is there, terrorists are there. Yes, the number of weapons, missiles, rockets is decreased, but still they have capabilities. So Hezbollah is one question, and this is an actor that may act. The Houthis, as I've mentioned before, can, of course, retaliate and target Israel. But even here, look, one rocket, one missile flying from Yemen to Israel is 2,000 kilometers. The distance between Iran and Israel is 1,200 kilometers, so a little bit shorter. One missile like that costs millions of dollars, of course, Iranian sponsored and made. So how many missiles will they fire? Once a day, twice a day? This is not, a heavy bombardment, and this is something that Israel has coped with in the past and will be able to cope with it again. And of course, Israel can attack Yemen like the 17 previous times it did. And I'll remind you that one of the last times, Israel actually eliminated most of the generals and ministers in the Houthi, so-called Houthi government. So I'm not sure they will be as blunt. Going to Iraq. Iraq is, you're right, it's a challenge. And here we see Iranian footprints all over the country. But, and there's a but here, Iraq wanted to join the fun with the other proxies a year ago. And Israel sent a very clear and direct deterrent message. And as you know, they decided to sit back. They understood the message and they said, okay, we don't want to be Lebanon. We don't want to be Gaza. We don't want to be the Houthis in the port. For example, look at Hudaydah port in the Houthis after an attack. And therefore, we are sitting back. We're not going to do anything. So that message has been loud and clear, and Iraq did not participate. Therefore, I am not sure it will participate now. As for the other countries in the region, as I have mentioned before, the US, for the last 4 weeks already, has been sending here cargo with weapons, missiles, different kinds of air defense batteries, which are spread all over the region, whether it's Jordan, whether it's Bahrain, whether it's other countries in the area. So these are protection means, defense means, also for the countries who don't have that capabilities, because here in Israel, we are lucky enough to have a defense umbrella or 4 layers. The first layer is the Iron Dome, which tackles short-range rockets. The second layer is a defense system called David Sling, which targets, intercepts medium-range rockets. The third layer is the Arrow 2 and 3, and these target the Iranian and Houthi ballistic missiles. And then, of course, Israel has the space capabilities. In addition to all of that, you have Aegis ships here in the Mediterranean, aircraft carriers. You have different kinds of aircrafts which are in other bases, American bases in the area. We have THAAD batteries, which are in Israel and outside of Israel. So we have all these layers of defense. So I'm not concerned on the defense issue, and I'm not concerned of a very long regional war encompassing many countries. I understand the concern of some of the countries, this NATO concept of the the world. Well, I've heard it for decades and decades. I think that internal tensions between the countries so deep that it's hard to me to see at this point of time such a mechanism that will work together. But we do have cooperations, and the countries among themselves have cooperation, especially intelligence and using airspace and so on. So not a long kind of confrontation. I would estimate it to a few days, hoping that it will create the beginning of the end of the Iranian regime.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Colonel Avitar. Burzin, do you have a comment? You have an observation?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Colonel, before you run away to a pleasant afternoon or whatever else you're doing, the Orientalist in me must speak up. And you need an Orientalist, someone like a dinosaur like me. 3 letters of the English alphabet, OIC. And please tell me, what has it achieved since 1969? I mean, Muslims love to talk about one prophet, one people, one book, and this unity which is more in the breach than the observance, actually. What has the OIC ever achieved on any Muslim issue, not just Palestine or Gaza, but even among themselves, where every resolution at the end of their summits never reflects what is being discussed? The fractiousness of Muslims within each other, even as we speak, of course, these may be just rumors. MBS is out to get rid of the Nahyans in Abu Dhabi because now they're daggers drawn with each other. So one does know of what Arab Muslim tribalism and fractiousness is. Today, Sisi and Erdogan are best buddies again. Yesterday, Erdogan was best buddies with Bashar Assad. So it goes on and on. So some of us have seen this game played out, as the late Eli Kaduri at London School of Economics used to call the wilderness of tigers that is the Middle East. Enough said.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We can just take one more quick question if anyone from the audience wants to ask. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up because we are already running past our schedule.
Any questions from the audience?
So can I have a discussion? Can I have a discussion?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, please, sure.
See, when we are in geopolitics, we have to look at it from 3 perspectives. First, geopolitics. Second important point is the intersection between resources, technology, and geography. That is the second element. The third important, the rise of radicalism and role of external powers, including United States over the years, who patronized these radical terrorist groups. Process, because Israel and Iran, friends once upon a time, it was Iran which recognized Israel. But the point is, and why this whole issue is flaring up. One important point is, it is the issue relating to the question of the US interest in this part of the world. We cannot ignore. Earlier it was Britain, now it is United States, and that is how the conflict is deepening day by day. That aspect one has to keep it in mind. Secondly, in the context of Israel and Saudi relations, or Israel, who is a better partner for Israel today? It is Saudi or UAE or Jordan? Because everything is being determined. For example, Israel-Saudi relations will be determined by Saudi-US relations. The point is, for Israel, they have to develop their own strategy, Israel's strategy towards the in this West Asian geopolitical zone, and that I think will help Israel to survive in a hostile, because Israel is caught in a security dilemma, and that needs to be taken into account. Thank you, Pandya Saab, Dr. Pandya. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. So with this, we come to the closure of our today's discussion. I would like to thank all our eminent speakers and distinguished experts who joined us today, and also the participants. With this discussion, I guess the 3 main takeaways. Definitely what's happening in Iran is certainly revolutionary. It's unprecedented. The protests on the grassroots level, they're basically not simply confined to the urban middle class. They're happening everywhere. But still, for the future, a few things persist. again, I would come back to the negotiations part. Let's say for this, for the time being, the negotiations succeed, and definitely that success or even the stability of those negotiations apparently looks to be very fragile. And if the Iranian regime gets enough time, which it is certainly going to utilize to strengthen itself, and over time, once it has acquired enough, I would say, strength, then it is most likely to ramp up its support for the proxies in that region. Now, that raises a big question for the Israel. What happens in the future, because it's like a perpetual threat, and we have to keep in mind that their nuclear program stands reversed, but it's not decimated. So they're certainly likely to rebuild it, and that threat persists. The second question, if let's say the confrontation begins between the two parties, then how long it's going to sustain, what will be the trajectory of it, how intense it would be. So that is again a very complex question, which will have its ramifications on everything, on the world of economics, on the world of geopolitics, and for the general, I would say, trajectory of the global geopolitics. And when we are saying today that the world order is changing, I guess, the trajectory of this likely US-Iran confrontation will have a critical role to define the future contours of the new world order. And thirdly, this whole reaction and the attitude of the other regional actors like Turkey, like Saudi and Qatar, still looks more like a puzzle. So I guess, we keep our fingers crossed. And at this stage, I understand, I completely agree with Colonel Avital that predicting future is a very, very difficult task to do. But yes, we, as avid watchers of security and foreign policy issues, we can certainly keep a watch and wait for peace to prevail. But as we all know, that peace is not that easy, and the nature has its own ways to define and dictate things. Thank you very much. Thank you.